Hello everybody, today we're looking at animation states, blending and using animation events to control things that take place in part of an animation. We're going to be looking at animating a complex door, opening and closing, controlling when an animation state plays via the state machines, making sure that door can open and close but only when a player interacts with it, which is going to be the most common use of this kind of resource. Animating small animated details like a flashing light, use of animation events to play sound effects, character animation states and transitions within character animation, and finally importing custom character animations from the different resources that we've got. Again, I'm probably going to break this into a two-parter, but we'll see how we get on for time. So what you'll notice on the Moodle page is that we're using our animation resources new. So this is under the tutorial section rather than using the template that we've been provided and been using for the previous couple of weeks. This time we're going to be using one that's available here under the animation PowerPoint, animation resources new. It may be named ever so slightly differently, but that's where we're going, that resource just under the animation PowerPoint. Once you have downloaded that resource, it will of course appear into your downloads folder. The name may be subtly different, but what you'll end up with is a zip folder, Animation Basics 2021.3.8. To extract that file, which is currently 0.5 GB in size, double click on the zip folder, wait for it to process because it does take a second, extract all, and then go through that process to extract that zip folder. If you're using 7-zip or you're using anything else and it doesn't give you that icon, right click on it and you can instead open with Windows Explorer, and that will open it up in the way that I've just shown you there. If you do get a slightly different icon from that one with a zip folder. Once that has finished extracting, and it will go from a 0.5 GB file, which is pretty substantial, to something that is substantially bigger, just over 1 GB. Shouldn't take you too long, but be aware that will take a bit of time. What you'll be presented with in the project is the Animation Basics folder here, so I'm just going to go and open that project, which I've got in my downloads folder. Remember guys, I encourage you to do that the same as well. Make sure it's in your downloads folder. Will take a minute for it to open up. Now, some of the key aspects about animation we're going to look at today are things like keyframes and being able to say that I would like a particular thing happening at a particular point in time, as well as making sure that we are comfortable with the 3 transformation tools, which is movement, rotation and scale, and any property that can be changed through the inspector can be changed and recorded through the animator. So if any of you are familiar with animating perhaps for YouTube or any content like that, you'll be used to the notion of a timeline where you can scrub across the scrub bar and you can be able to animate what we're doing. Now if I just show you what we're going to be creating today. This is the scene you should be presented with. We are inside of a cave. There is an atomic bomb sitting over here with a menacing looking red light, and we have a door. For Fallout fans, this should be very, very apparent where we're going with this. What you'll also notice in this particular scene is we've got some visual effects going on. So I've got a light here, just 2 lights pointing left and right. To create those type of lights, that's a game object. It's a light, and we're used to using point lights. However, this particular example is a spotlight where you can have it point in a particular direction. It's just a spotlight, and I've got 2 of them attached to each other. But you'll notice there's some visual effects going on with this lighting, and that's called bloom. So I've chosen to turn on and include in this particular thing the visual FX. So we've got the post-process stack active in this project, something we'll cover in more detail as we wear on. But here you can see there's some visual effects turned off, visual effects turned on. So I've just got some bloom, which is making some nice glowy effects there, and there's also some ambient occlusion taking place. Ambient occlusion is, if you look carefully in the corners of the scene, you'll see that they'll get subtly more dark, and that's just a nice added effect to make it feel more in keeping with the theme. There it is, you could just see it process there coming in. If I turn around, you can see there's a really big rock. Behind the big rock is a secret, there's an exit that we might be using later on, but there's a big rock. When we play the game, we'll be using a similar movement tool to what we've been using before, character controlling tool I should say. I've just chosen to attach a light just as an asset from the asset store, which as you can see we can look around, and it's got what's called a cookie. That's a cookie effect. I didn't know why it's called a cookie, but that's what it is. And then we've got an environment we can move around. I can't walk through any of these surfaces, and hopefully neither can you guys. We're going to need to open this door in order to get anywhere, otherwise we're trapped in this cave forever. So in order to fully utilise this space, we're going to need to make sure that we can have the animator recording what we're recording. So to do that, you go to Window, Animation, and Animator. So what the animator does is a state machine. So you need this open. This currently is blank because we have no animations within our scene. And what we also need is Window, Animation, and Animation, which opens an animation window that looks like this. Almost always you'd want to grab that and snap it down the bottom by your console, because we like our animation to go from left to right in a long space. So I'm just going to go back to the scene view. When you animate any object, you don't animate the object by itself. Reason for this is you animate the parent, not the child of an object. So I've taken great care to name things a little bit clearly here. What we've got is the FPS controller, which in this particular scene just allows us to move around, but what we're interested in is things like the door system, which selects this entire block here, which is the wall, this large space over here, which is where our bar is going to come from, and our door, which is here. We've also got a rear door section, so if I just poke my head through the vault, hopefully what you guys can see there, that there are two doors, which contains two children, a right door and a left door. And if you remember, any property that can be changed, like a movement, can be recorded. So if I take the door left and move it over there, we could animate it to do that later on, or I've positioned the pivot point so we could instead rotate them like so. Depends on how you would like to animate your rear doors in a second, but we're going to start with this key front door. What I would like to select is the door system, which is a parent, and we're going to add an animation to children of this object. So you always animate the parent object, not the children. So with the parent selected, with the animation toolbar available at the bottom, to begin animating door system, create an animator and an animation clip. If I press create, it will do both of those things for me. Create. I'm going to create an animation. Now I've already created a folder in this space called animations. Let's put them all in there, make sense. If you don't already have one in a project, it's just a folder called animations. I'm going to call this door open. Notice I can have a space in these names, however when we're dealing with code you know that we can't. So I'm going to press save, and now this will change into something people are more familiar with. It looks a bit like YouTube, it looks like a bit like any kind of video editing software. Now we can manually edit properties or we can record properties. So you've got the record button over here. That then goes red to say anything you are recording right now will be remembered at that point in an animation. The numbers at the top are the numbers in seconds. So what I've got here is 000, obviously 0, and then I've got 1 over here. That's not 1 minute, that is 1 second. So if I were to animate this door opening, and I did it there, it would open far too quickly. It would open in 1 second. So you can use your middle mouse to scroll in and to scroll out. This animation is going to take 10 seconds to complete, so I'm going to carry on scrolling out until I can see the 10-second mark. Again, you can zoom in or you can pan across using the middle mouse to drag and to drop. Now we don't want our door, which is this door here, we don't want it to open straight away and go straight over there. There's going to be a 3-step process. I'm going to turn recording off to show you what I want. We want it to start there, then after 3 seconds go there, and then after 10 seconds go over there. And we're going to have the bar come and grab it, and then that will allow access into this space here. So with the animation recording, we're going to say at 000, at the 0 seconds, just be there, chill, don't do anything. at the 3-second mark, so you see I'm just moving the scrub bar, I'm not clicking in here, that makes a drag select. I'm clicking in the top bit here and I'm going to 3 seconds. You can also see, if you want to be precise with this, the frames. So I can type in 180 if I'd rather, to make sure it's precise, or you can zoom in if you want to be exactly bang on, but 3 seconds is what we're aiming for. At the 3-second mark, the door, notice I've now got the door selected, not the door system, I've clicked into the door. I'm going to drag that forward. Notice where I've positioned my view of this so I can get an easy view of it. If I was lined up like this, it'd be really difficult to move it forward and to see how far it is. But what I've done is position my camera so I can see the whole view. I'm going to move it forward, and you can see that's created a keyframe. It's created a keyframe at 0 seconds, it's created a keyframe at 3 seconds. If I click in the scrub bar, you will now see it transition between the first keyframe and the second keyframe, between 0 and 3. I can of course scrub however quickly I'd like, but if I press the play button, you'll see that happen in real time. And it will automatically loop, which may not be the behaviour that you want, but in this editor is what you always get. The next behaviour that we want though is at the 10-second mark. So again, I'm going to look at 10 seconds, which is 600 seconds because it assumes 60 frames per second. We then want it moved all the way across on the red axis, which is the Z axis. I want that moved all the way over here, so it's just about touching the wall. So what we've got here is 2 movement instructions, well 3 keyframe instructions. Stay where you are on the 0 set of frame, move forward, and then move to the right. However, this door is going to roll wherever it's going. So you can see, again, if you've seen the video that ties in with this, what we're trying to create is a door that goes to there and then rolls out of the way. So at frame 600, I now want to add another property, and you can see up here, position, it's gone red to say this is an animated property. I now want to rotate it 180 degrees around the blue axis at the 10-second mark. So notice I'm still at 10 seconds and I'm going to rotate. If I hold down Control, that will turn snappings on, which means I'll snap in 15-degree increments, means it's a hell of a lot easier to get exactly 180. And you can see the blue axis was the Z axis, which now reads 180 at that point. You can now see it's recorded information about the position of the object at certain points and the rotation of the object at certain points. So at the end of our animation, it will have completed a full rotation. You may notice though there is a problem with this. It's created the start to the rotation at 0. So if I scrub back to the start and play the animation, hopefully you guys will be able to see the problem with this. It's moving forward and it's rotating and it's rotating and it's now moving to the right. So it looks pretty good from the 3-second mark to the 10-second mark, but it's obviously wrong at the start. To fix this problem, we don't need to add any more keyframes. We just need to grab this keyframe, which is in the rotation bit at 0. I'm just going to drag and move it to the 3-second mark. There you go. I don't want it to do any rotation until 3 seconds, so don't do any rotation, which is what I'm telling it. And then from 3 to 10, rotate out of the way. And that feels pretty good. If you get good at animation, you'll notice that that isn't exactly perfect, but you could spend a lot of time polishing this up and making it look an awful lot better. What we also now want though is this bar at the back to come and grab the door and move it as if that's the thing that's pulling it, rather than it just moving under its own power. So because the animation lives in the parent, we can animate any child object and it will be part of the same animation. So it is so important if this doesn't work. Now if you try this and they're 2 separate objects, you haven't animated the door system. Call us over, tell us, we'll tell you how to fix it. But now what we want to say is at the 0 seconds, it is there. But at the 3-second mark, frame 180, this needs to be all the way smack bang in the middle of the door. So we need to make sure we've got enough gap for it to slide down. I've put enough gap because I've done this animation more than once. You may find that your door may need pulling a little bit further forward, in which case on the 3-second mark, you can select the door and move it forward. But it has to be exactly at the 3-second mark. If you miss by a bit, so you see I'm now frame 182, if I move a little bit, it will create 2 keyframes and it will try and do both of them. So you can see there was a very erratic animation there. because I've got two keyframes that are very close. So I didn't want that behaviour, so I've just pressed Ctrl Z to undo it. So what we're doing here is at the 3-second mark, frame 180, this bar, which is called the door arm, is going to move from where it is, and I'm going to move it on the x-axis, and I'm going to line it up so the middle of that little cross piece is in the middle. And I'm just looking for the rough line. I can move my camera around to see, does that look like from this view? Is that roughly in the middle? A bit too far, maybe there. If you do deselect like I just did there, Ctrl Z is your friend. So you can now see it's recorded positions and rotations for the door and just positions for the door arm. So it's moving there, and then we need it to be back where it was at the 10-second mark. So I could move it, but I'm lazy, and I encourage you guys to be lazy. Now it knows where it was at 0 seconds, so we've recorded that information that's in that keyframe. So I'm just going to select that keyframe, Ctrl C to copy it, and as long as the scrub bar is where you want it to be at 10-second mark, Ctrl V to paste it, and there you go. It's taken that keyframe, which is where it was at the start, and now pasted it at the end point, so it's exactly where it's finished. However, that isn't quite perfect because we still want that in the middle of the door, so I'm just going to line it up so it's in the middle of the door. And let's see what that looks like. Let's see what that looks like from the perspective of our player. There's the door bar coming across, grabbing the door, and the door is sliding across. Looks pretty cool, and it will loop. So I haven't pressed play, I haven't restarted the game, it's looping because that's what animations do by default. So I'm going to go out of play mode. So that works. We can polish that up and make it a little bit more detailed, but that works. If I select the door system again though, you can see it's recorded its animations. And if I go into that animator that we opened up, if you didn't open this up, that's under Window, Animation and Animator, you'll see that door open is currently the orange animation state. So when we start, play this animation, which is not what we want. We shouldn't have our door magically open before the player walks over to it or interacts with it. We want nothing to happen at the start of our game. So to make this happen, right click anywhere in the grey space. Oh, I appear to have broken Unity. Right click anywhere in the grey space and create a state which is empty. This state tells the game to do a whole lot of nothing. However, that's not linked in any way yet. So I'm going to right click on this new state and make a set as layer default state. There you go. It will now do the default animation, so the nothing animation, but this one isn't linked now, so it won't play this animation yet. Won't do anything. So if we go through our list, animating a complex door opening and closing. Well, we've done the opening, haven't done the closing yet. So again, we're going to deal with that, and we're going to create a new state for door closing. Back to scene. I encourage you guys to be lazy, because if you're lazy you are using your time more effectively if it produces in a good outcome. So let me show you how you can be lazy here. If we've got a door opening, well, door closing is the same thing but in reverse. So you could make a new animation and play it in reverse, or you can make a new animation and copy paste the opening one and flip it, which is what we're going to do now. So with the door system selected, we're now going to create a new animation for our door system. So where it says door open, I'm going to click on the drop down there. I'm going to create a new clip, and this is going to be called, again in the animations folder, door close. Makes sense to me. Notice how door close doesn't have any animation. We've lost all of our keyframes. We haven't lost them. We can just select them from the two drop downs here. So again, I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to go to the door open animation. I'm going to select with a drag select all of those keyframes. Control C to copy them. I'm going to choose the drop down and go to door close. Control V to paste it and zoom out, because remember by default it only shows you 1 second. So that's well and good, but that's now closing is the same as opening. We can move each of these keyframes, but Unity gives us a powerful tool to scale our animations. So if I wanted anything to be quicker or slower, I can grab these bars and it will rescale the entirety of the animation. So if I wanted things to be slower or quicker, you can rescale it. But what we're interested in doing is rescaling it by flipping it the other way round. So I'm going to grab this bar on the left and move it all the way past this one, and I'm going to grab this one that was at the end, move it all the way back to the start, and then grab the end point again and line it up to the 10-second mark. Maybe you want it to take longer to close than to open, but we're going to have them take the same amount of time. So door close should now be the exact opposite animation, which it seems to be. Looks pretty good. No extra work, but well worth doing. If I now go back into the animator, as long as door system is selected, back into the animator, you'll now see we have two states that we've created, the door open animation and the door close animation. We're going to set up some kind of script in a second that will make it play the door open and the door close when we tell it to. So let's just tick off what we've done. Done. Controlling when an animation state plays via the state machine. So what we've done here is we've shown that we've got the entry state, which is currently just saying do nothing. So let's rename this rather than new state. I'm just going to call it do nothing. There you go. But what we're going to use now is a bit of code that will say, no matter where you are in this state, in this flowchart, go find the thing called door open and go play it. We can be a little bit cleverer with the way that we do this though. So I want it to go from the state here. I'm going to right click and make a transition to the door open. So you see it gives you a little line, and I want to snap on door open. So what this has done is a line from do nothing to door open. Right now that's pointless, because what it will do is do nothing for a second and then play the animation. And with the animator actually open, so I'm still playing the game, you can actually see the state machine tells you how far through the animation it currently is. Really useful if you're trying to debug things. But what we're interested in is that only happens if a condition is true, like an if statement. So we want something to be true. With our animator, we've got parameters, and I want to create a parameter. I'm going to click this little plus icon. I'm going to create a boolean. So I'm going to create something. I'm going to create a variable called is opening. Capital I, capital O, no spaces. Is opening. And that little tick there, you can tick it on or off, but I'm keeping it off because we're not opening when the game starts. We're going to write code that will make that true when the player walks near it. This little line here, a new condition, so I'm clicking on the line now and it goes blue. When a condition is true, I'm going to click the plus. If is opening is true, then we do this. So if I go back into the play mode, I'm going to put the animator over here just so we can see what it's doing. When I play the game, is opening should be false and it should remain stuck in this state. So let me make that full screen so you can see. It's doing a whole lot of nothing. Good. The other thing I want to change in the animation that we've got here is this transition has this thing called has exit time. If you guys could see the bar that was going from left to right, that means that only perform the transition when it gets to the end of its do nothing animation. No, I want it to open straight away, so I don't want has exit time to be on. What I also want to do for my open and close animations, if I double click on door open, loop time, I don't want that on. I don't want it to loop my animation. Why would a door open, then snap back to the start and then open again? Doesn't make sense. So I'm turning that off and same for door close. Double click, door close. Quick save because I'm paranoid. So let's write a bit of code that says when the player walks over here, this thing will tell the animator on this thing to go and play that. I'm going to select the computer terminal. I'm going to create on the computer terminal a new component, and it's just going to be a simple box collider. This box collider though, I don't want it to be a collider, I want it to be a trigger. So this box glider I've just created has an option for isTrigger. Yeah. And what I can also do is change the width of it, change the center position of it, or I can use this tool here, the edit bounding volume, to select it, and then I can just make it a little bit bigger this way, which is what I want. When the player walks right in front of it, it detects that it's walked into a trigger zone, and that will execute some code. That's what we want to do. So I've clicked that little button there, and you can change the bounds of your box. Or you can change the values, it really doesn't hurt. We're now going to write a script to this. Remember, if we're dealing with script, edit, preferences, external tools, make sure it says Visual Studio. So now what we want is a new component on here. We're going to write a new script, and I'm going to call this open door. Notice again, no space here, and I'm calling it something slightly different to the animation to make it a bit clearer in my mind. So this is called open door. I could call it trigger door. I'll go with open door. I'm committed now. Make a new script, make a new script. As always, once it compiles, we're going to open that script, and the script will basically say when something walks into this zone, make sure that something was the player, and if it was, play the animation. You'll be able to use a script very similar to this to decide if you've won your game. You know, if you go to a zone, have you won or not? So we've got our door open script. Let's go and have a look at it. Previously, we've had to do all kinds of clever stuff in the start or the update loops. So I've had the start and the update loop. You'll be pleased to know we don't need either of those. So from line 7 to line 17, gone. Just going to delete it. What we do want to use though is a new type of event, which is what that was, a new type of function, and that function is going to be on trigger enter. So I'm just going to type the words on trigger, and it will hopefully auto complete for me. Remember, if it's not auto completing, edit, preferences, external tools, set it to Visual Studio. But I'm just going to choose on trigger enter, not the 2D, on trigger enter, press enter, and it will write the entire block of code for me, including the 2 squigglies. Private void on trigger enter collider other. What this is doing is it says when something enters into the trigger zone, keep a record of the other thing that was involved in this collision. Remember, we are the computer terminal. The other thing will be the player or something else. And then we can use the information about the other thing to see if that other thing was the player. So I've just taken a quick save, and I'm going to make sure that the FPS controller has a tag that we can use, and it currently doesn't. So with the FPS controller, I'm going to give it a tag of player, which then means I can go into Visual Studio and say, well, if the other thing involved in the collision had a tag, and if that other thing's tag was player with a capital P, I don't think I write it like that. Do I write it like that? Yes, I do. If the other dot tag double equals, that's not a typo, player in double quotes with a capital P, then we're going to do something. The reason why we have to check if it was the player is if the player could throw a grenade and the grenade went through this trigger zone, you don't want the grenade setting this off, or an NPC walks through it, you don't want them setting this off. So we're checking, was that thing the player? What we now want to do is to say, well, if it was, go get the component on something else. So we need a reference to the something else. So I'm going to pop up here under line 6, I've just pressed enter to give myself some lines down, a public, and I could use all sorts of different ways for doing this, but what I want is a public animator. Not animation, which is the default one it tries to go for, but animator, that one there. And I'm going to call this anim. What we can now say is anim dot set bool. Do you remember that boolean value we set earlier for is it opening, is it closing, what's it doing? So set bool, and then in regular brackets, in double quotes, the boolean we want to change. So we wrote this boolean value called is opening. Again, because my typing is awful, I'm going to double click on that and copy it. Make sure I get my spelling right. is opening. I wrote it with a capital I and a capital O. So I'm setting is opening, comma, to a value. I want it to be true. When I walk into this zone, is opening becomes true. I've saved that, and if I've set up my state machine correctly, it will go from the do nothing state via this transition where if is opening is true, which it now will be because the player walked into it and it went to true, the door will open. There is just one more thing that we're missing though. Currently our terminal doesn't know what animator to control, so anim's currently blank, and the animator lived on the door system. If you remember, we put the animator in the parent. Quick word to the wise, I want to drag door system into there. If you left click door system, you'll lose your selections. So what you do with your computer terminal selected, it's a left click and hold. I'm holding, I'm dragging, and I want to drop that in the anim slot. So that is telling the animator on the door system, oi mate, go set this variable to true. Let's see if that's what happens. So it's not playing, which is the behavior we wanted. I walk within the trigger zone and the animation plays. And because we told it not to loop, it should remain when it gets to the end, and then we can walk through and we're in this area. So we have just completed controlling an animation state machine and opening and closing the door using user interaction via code. There we go. Talk to you in a bit.